Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan. And today we're talking rooftop agrivoltaics, growing food under solar panels on top of buildings. Our guest is Dr. Jennifer Bousselot. She is a green roofs researcher and an assistant professor of horticulture and landscape architecture at Colorado State University, Denver. She is a leading expert and advocate of rooftop agrivoltaics and its benefits. Really happy to have Jennifer on the podcast today. Hey, Jennifer, welcome to the podcast. It's very good to meet you.
It's a delight to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Ted.
Oh, you're welcome. We love having inspiring people on the podcast, and you fill the bill perfectly. And you are sitting where? Are you in Denver as we speak?
I am. I'm just south of Denver, Colorado, really close to my campus.
Very good. Now, I've introduced you already as a green roofs researcher and assistant professor. What are you working on this week? Here it is, the cold of winter, and I know you're not up on rooftops, right?
That's right. It is cold this time of year, but I was just up on the roof yesterday. The National Western Stock Show is going on right now, and so we have a lot of visitors at our new campus that's literally right across the street from their new headquarters.
And so how is that going to, so the visitors are coming to visit your green roofs? You're going to be on tour?
That's right. Although it's a little bit covered with snow at the moment, but we have all kinds of educational information out and little diagrams of how green roof systems work.
And how many rooftops are we talking about?
So my research actually spans 3 cities. I have research in Fort Collins on our home campus, the main campus, and then on the Nutrient Building. I have research out at our foothills, just 2 miles west of main campus. And then I have 2 green roofs on the CSU Spur campus in downtown Denver. And I even have research going on with my extension colleague at Colorado Springs in El Paso County.
Right. Oh, okay. So a number of sites. Let's back up just for a few minutes and talk about you and how you got into this. But as I understand it, you grew up on a farm in Iowa. Is that right?
That's right. I grew up on a small family farm, the youngest of 8 kids.
8 kids. Oh, wow.
8 kids, yes. And my twin sister and I were the free labor. So when all the 6 older ones left when we were about 9 years old, we became the farmers. So Dad was ahead of his time in gender equality and had us baling hay, driving tractors, cleaning animal pens, just like anyone else.
Wow, that's a lot. And so, what were you growing on the farm?
So when I was really young, before the farm crisis in the 80s, we had a 5-year rotation. So we grew corn and soybeans, of course, but we also had a year of oats and then 2 or 3 years of alfalfa. So we baled all kinds of hay, and we'd even graze our livestock rotationally. And we had all the livestock, cattle, pigs, even a couple of horses.
And so there's sounds like hundreds of acres.
Yeah, 360 acres.
And you and your sister decided what we have to find some other pathway in life, or is that right?
We didn't stray far, actually. Both of us are.
You stayed in agriculture, right?
Yeah.
but what did she end up doing?
So she actually has worked entirely her career in agriculture too. So breeding, ag sales right now, as we've gotten older. It's
who's handling
hard
the farm?
on your body to be bent over.
Who's got the family farm at this point?
So we own it all together as a family. My mom still owns it, and we will all inherit it, all 8 of us.
Yeah. All right. So you have very deep farming roots, and I hope I don't botch this. In terms of your chronology, did you go to college at Iowa State as an undergrad?
That's right. I did my undergraduate in plant health and protection in the College of Agricultural Sciences, and a master's degree in sustainable agriculture, and then moved out with my high school sweetheart right away after graduation out to Colorado. and I worked in Extension. So I stayed with my ag roots south of Denver in Douglas County, and got so involved in a project with the Environmental Protection Agency on their green roof installation they were installing in 2006 and 7 that I went back to graduate school for a PhD at Colorado State University and did my research right in downtown Denver next to Union Station.
And I love the story. I'm gonna let you embellish it, but the idea that you were going to do a green roof project, a research project for your doctoral thesis, and then all of a sudden they decided they were going to put solar panels on the building, and that I saw the word that sullied your project.
Oh, I love that. Yes. A colleague of mine I've known now for almost 20 years was so excited. He was a solar engineer and was so excited to incorporate solar panels.
Yeah.
Well, he got his panels placed right next to my research, and I was furious because I knew as a scientist that anything that influences the plant environment is going to influence our data, right?
Yeah.
But it was just absolutely astonishing, Ted, to be able to see that plant response,
Yeah.
especially in such a extreme environment with water that's so limited. And those plants just thrived adjacent to and under that solar panel. So I was captivated.
And you called it a happy accident, I think.
That's right.
I mean, and then I was interested in this, that the plants are growing better, and then you found out that solar performs better too, because the plants have this cooling effect, or the green roof has an evaporative cooling effect, lowers the temperature. Solar panels operate better at a lower temperature, and I saw in some of the documents that I was reading 4 to 8% boost in solar productivity as well. So what a great synergy.
It really is. And, Ted, I like to describe it as, from the human perspective. So I'm always talking about biophilic design, like how can we mimic nature? Well, in nature, we often see a combination of trees and grasslands, right? And then that's savanna. And when you go under the tree, you get shaded from the sun, but the sun is actually, helping store some carbon with that tree. And then the plants below you evaporatively cool. So you are a lot cooler under the tree. It's the same effect, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Let's sort of diverge for a second and just talk about green roofs. Then we'll get into food production, which is where you've really taken this. But what about green roofs? I mean, there's historically, you go back to the gardens of Babylon in 500 BC, and were those green roofs were they for cooling those buildings, or was it just for looks?
So interestingly, the first green roofs, if you're talking Hanging Gardens of Babylon, that was for Nebuchadnezzar II's wife, who was from Mesopotamia. And she was moving from the verdant mountains into the desert. So it's 100 kilometers south of current day Baghdad, Iraq. So it's pretty, it was less arid then, but it's a pretty dry area. So it was entirely to make her feel at home. And then it became such an incredible sort of vision that it's been documented through history. If you move a little more recent to like the Vikings era, they used green roofs as a way to protect their location so that the enemy wouldn't find them.
I wouldn't see them.
And even more recent, like in pioneer days, or even in the Scandinavian countries where wood is limited, the green roofs were used as protection for abodes. So it was a way to manage indoor temperatures. And there's the benefit of having a little bit of beauty right on top of your head.
Right. Then I read that in the 60s that the Germans advanced green roof technology. And what technology are we talking about? Is that really like sort of leak protection, or?
That's a great question. So original green roofing was essentially cutting sod and placing it on top of some sort of crude waterproofing. And that's like birch bark type of waterproofing. The modernized version was using a lot of our roofing membranes that we have and then constructing the layers of the green roof in a way to maximize the benefits you're looking for. If it's cooling, you want increased depth to allow for additional evapotranspiration. If it's for stormwater management, you design it with drought tolerant plants so they don't have to be irrigated, all of those things. So we have tailored now the different layers that we use on green roofs. And I say now, I mean, it's really been since the 1960s, but I'm thinking in the era of all the way back to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
Right. Well, this is a little out of the sequence I had planned, but I was reading that if you wanted to have a just grass roof, like a xeriscape rooftop, maybe you could get away with 4 inches of soil.
That's
But
right.
if you want to grow crops, you're looking at 8 to 18 inches of soil.
That's
And
right.
that gets you into some serious weight issues, right? That limits, which roofs can handle that. But then I was reading that you have these engineered substrates that are super lightweight materials that give you like you were saying, I think, give you the properties that you need in terms of moisture retention without the heavy weight. Is that right?
You got it exactly, Ted. I mean, that's the sort of remarkable thing that has come up in especially this century is being able to sort of play with those layers while still holding true to like the original specifications that were written in the 60s through 2000 in Europe. We have these guidelines that we still all follow. And so now we're being able to like put some creativity into how we manage all those factors and still have success.
And what are the materials? I mean, I saw the term secret sauce there, but is it decomposed granite or vermiculite, or what is it that keeps it light?
It's a combination of things, and it's really specific to individual manufacturers. Most of them are what we call expanded aggregate. So think like kitty litter. In fact, haydite, which is what the non-clumping kitty litter is made out of, has been used on a number of green roofs I helped install. So pumice is another naturally occurring material that is similar. Lava rock, where it's lightweight, the density of the individual particle is light. And so we can use those materials. The original materials were literally the shucked off red clay tiles from European rooftops that were collected after they dropped and shattered. And so that was the original substrate that we used to reuse that rather than to create something new. Now, of course, we have sort of more specific combinations. So we'll kiln fire various clays, slates, and shales in order to get the exact specification we're looking for.
How interesting. How interesting. Let's go back a little bit to the benefits of green roofs before we get to the food. Home for pollinators. I mean, I know that's become really a big important issue, right? Is maintaining the bee populations.
That's right. Yes. In fact, our lab is working on trying to follow the flowering timing, and our data is showing, we're starting to publish this, that plants respond differently on green roofs. Depending on the species, they will bloom 2 to 6 weeks earlier, which is really good for pollinators that are coming out of dormancy earlier and needing some resources because they're a lot more tied. Their lifeline is a lot more tied to air temperature than soil temperature. But plants are typically a lot more attached to soil temperature. So on a green roof, because it's so dry and lightweight, it warms up more quickly and the plants are blooming earlier and providing that resource.
All these secondary benefits that are these spin-off benefits. So this is there. Tell me how green roofs gained enough in popularity that cities like San Francisco and Denver passed ordinances that if you have over 25,000 square feet, you have to have a green roof. And then I know Toronto is a leader in terms of green roofs, and Cambridge, Mass, and New York and Seattle. And were there policies put in place largely for the energy aspects or the pollinator aspects, or what do you think drove the policies?
Yeah, I wish it was pollinators.
Yeah,
It's not, although that's been a nice sort of secondary thing.
yeah.
Honestly, the two biggest things, the most often cited reason that green roofs are installed is managing stormwater. So it was actually Chicago and Portland about the same time, just before the turn of the century, that were both struggling with how to manage their combined sewer overflow systems that they have, because every time it rained, the raw sewage would overflow into open bodies of water. So they were trying to hold the
Mm,
stormwater upstream a little bit so that they had fewer days where they would have issues with the combined sewer overflow. And another one is building efficiency, but it's interesting to watch sort of the trends in just roofing and building materials in general. Their efficiency, their R values have increased tremendously. So we still get benefit from
mhm,
green roofs for energy efficiency, but that hasn't been the biggest driver. The second biggest driver after stormwater has really been about urban heat island effect.
mhm.
And so, if you look at one of the best case studies we've had, which is not on our continent in Basel, Switzerland, they have been able to meet their targets of reduced stormwater runoff and reduction in the urban heat island by about 3 degrees by greening about 14 to 15% of their rooftops.
Very
And
impressive.
so those are the biggest drivers, are sort of the societal level
Yeah,
benefits that
right.
just automatically come with urbanization.
Yeah. And I love the notion of a sponge that the cities are looking for, for surface areas like rooftops becoming sponges that absorb at least some of that moisture so you don't have that massive and torrential runoff. Okay, now let's fast forward and get into food production. You decided that greening rooftops wasn't enough. that what about growing food there, right?
I've always been someone to ask what if, and much to the frustration of my parents, my major professors, and now, thankfully, we get to sort of explore that. Because to me, Ted, the most
Mm,
thrilling thing would be to be stacking these benefits.
right.
If you ask yourself, what does society need? We need energy, we need water, and we need food.
Mm,
In order, those are our raw materials, right? We need clean air and lots of other things too, but those are sort of our fundamentals. And if you can design a system that can actually provide some additional energy, provide some additional food to add to food security, and conserve water, because we can irrigate a lot less underneath those solar panels. Um,
mhm.
to me, that's just where we need to be focusing our energy as a society, is trying to find those solutions at that nexus.
Right. And then you've pointed out that one half of the world's population currently lives in urban areas. That's expected to grow to two-thirds by 2050. And I loved what you said in your TED Talk, where you aptly said, all those people eat.
That's right. I'm one of those interesting academics that I have one foot in more the ecological aspects and one foot more in agriculture. And the
Hmm.
thing I always like to remind my colleagues, that are pulling me more in one direction or another, you all eat too.
Right. It's very fundamental, isn't it? But
Yes.
what about what? I mean, I'm thinking. Told you I've lived in Colorado. I love Colorado. Denver's the mile high city. What grows there? I mean, you have a short growing season. I guess is one way of putting it. But how does that limit your work?
Oh, it absolutely does limit our work. I mean, having only we basically can produce food from April to October, but only cold tolerant crops like leafy greens, which is something we're publishing a lot on right now. But what I'm really interested in, and I'm submitting a lot of grants on right now, is incorporating other food crops that are more perennial. And so, something that's high value, like berries, raspberries, we're even going to try to look at blackberries, that are marginally hardy there. Thankfully, the
Hmm.
protection from those solar panels and the microenvironment we have, we're actually seeing sort of like a zone or two warmer, plant response than we do on the ground.
So now I was interested. I read about your moving towards raspberries, and I know that a lot of agrivoltaics, the research that I've looked at is up in the state of Maine, where they're covering over blueberry farms or blueberry fields. I guess it's usually on slopes, so it's not sort of a traditional field. But the berries are an interesting one, and you mentioned the perennial. And then the berry is a very high value, as I understand, is a very high, tricky one to grow, right? And tricky one to sell and market and distribute, but very high value crop. Is that right?
You got it exactly. And the reason we're so focused on berries is like, if you look at them from like an ecological standpoint, these are understory plants. So they typically grow in their sort of native analogs, adjacent to or under trees, larger trees, right? Which is exactly the kind of, mimicry we're doing by putting a artificial tree up above it with some shade. And they're also very nutritionally dense. So a lot of the sort of nutrients that we need as humans, say vitamin C, but there's a number of them, are there. We also have the ability to potentially increase their potency by giving them these little bit more extreme environments.
That is really interesting. Well, let's talk about the other crops that you've had success with. You mentioned leafy vegetables, but I think chili peppers, lettuce, cucumbers, tomatoes, onions, cilantro, garlic, those are all thumbs up. Those have been working for you in Denver?
That's a great question, Ted. All of those crops grow well in Denver, period. And they grow well for us under semi-transparent solar panels. So those are, think sort of sunglasses, right, in terms of what it's going to look like. So they allow some of the light through. In the deepest, darkest shade, all of our fruiting crops struggle. So anything that flowers then fruits, we have a lot more success with things that are, say, leafy greens or root crops. Onions do well no matter sort of what the conditions are.
So it's not just how you space the panels then, it's the type of panels that some of them have the white, I don't know what it is, the plastic backing. That's translucent but not transparent. And what you want, I guess, is the clearer ones where you can actually see the cells from the underside. Is that right?
That's what we're looking for, yes. However, there aren't very many UL certified, UL listed options out there. So we're working with manufacturers all the time trying to fabricate the right sort of panel types. So we have all different kinds of transparencies, but they're not available on the market yet.
Gotcha.
So we have a paper that's really sort of characterizing the light levels that exist under the various types of solar panels. And it's just so thrilling to me to see that we can essentially put the sunglasses on and get food production and still some energy production at the same time.
That's really great. And then some crops didn't like the heat. I think I read things like carrots, no-go, spinach, arugula. Is that right?
So the spinach and arugula did not like the full sun conditions on a green roof because it's very dry. Even right after irrigation, it drains so well. We designed it that way, right? So if we have an event, it slows it down. It doesn't overflow. So carrots, arugula, spinach are all cooler, moisture loving plants. And under solar panels are those conditions. So they actually do better under the solar panels than in the full sun on green roofs.
So it's all really very specific. And I guess when you go to a different bioregion, a different part of the country, these characteristics all shift again in terms of what kind of panels, how much shading, what kind of plants, what your growing season is.
You're absolutely right, Ted. And that's why a lot of us, we are very regionally focused, more sort of, humid, moist versus sunny, dry, because those are sort of the conditions. If you have clouds a lot, it's one sort of set of growing conditions. If you have sun a lot, it's different. And that's part of why Colorado is so ideal. We have so many days of sunlight a year, it is ideal for solar installations. And there have been some calculations made by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory here in Colorado, where they need about 10 million acres of solar panel installation in order to accomplish energy independence. And so a lot of that would be in the western half of the US, only because we have so much sun.
Yep, fantastic. A few more sort of, practical issues that I wanted to hit on and let you reinforce because I'm really interested in how this scales up, and people must be worried about roofs leaking. We touched on it for a moment there, but has this been an issue for you, or how do you assure that you don't want your demonstration projects resulting in leakage of beautiful buildings, right?
That's right. It's interesting. I've gotten that question the whole 20 plus years I've been working with green roofs. And ironically, if you look at the statistics, of what's actually occurred, there are fewer leaks under green roofs than non-green roofs of those membranes. So it has everything to do with the integrity of the membrane. So that has to be absolutely watertight, no matter if you have a green roof or not. And unless you have sort of like a traumatic event, like a penetration, someone, sticks a shovel through and penetrates the membrane. Yeah. Having a green roof on top of the membrane actually protects it by 2 times up to 5 times its life, because there's only 2 things that normally break down, except like hail and stuff. There's only 2 chronic things that break down membranes, and that's ultraviolet light from the sun, and then the shrink swell cycle that happens every day as temperatures rise during the day and cool at night. But a green roof actually mitigates those 2 things. No light reaches the membrane, and there's very little fluctuation in temperature at the membrane level under a green roof. So actually, green roofs end up helping protect.
And then would you cover the whole roof with dirt or this engineered substrate and then walk on it, or would you leave the walk paths without dirt on them?
There's a lot of ways to make it happen, and it's really specific to the building design. But in my perfect world, we would cover the entire roof with green roofs. Yeah. And in parts of Europe, it's actually less expensive to install because the insurance companies have come to figure out they have a lot fewer claims on buildings that have green roofs than ones that don't.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask you about the marginal cost, but maybe the negative marginal cost to put a green roof on a
not
building.
In the U.S. We have not reached economies of scale here in the U.S. And let me tell you, I really had my eyes opened a year ago. We had the opportunity to circumnavigate the globe, and in Asia, every coast of Africa and Europe, I saw more green roofs in cities than I have in all of North America. And we were just in South America too, just a few weeks ago. Green roofs are commonplace. They don't have to call them out. We are literally the continent with the fewest green roofs from my just observation.
So we have a lot of catching up to do.
I think we do.
Now, you dropped this circumnavigating the globe, and you mentioned this earlier, and I'm fascinated. Tell us a little bit about. I always ask my guests, what do you do for your work-life balance? And you've dropped this. You've been with your high school sweetheart your whole life. You have a couple kids, and you've just taken them around the world. How did you do that?
I was so lucky. I was selected to be a global teaching scholar at Colorado State University for semester at sea. So Colorado State University is the academic arm for semester at sea right now. We have that bid. And so I had to go through a series of interviews before COVID even happened in order to get this opportunity. And so every day that the ship was sailing, I was teaching students. We had about 450 students on that voyage. And every day we were in port, we were travelers. I had a couple of field trips as well. So We docked in 9 ports on 3 continents and really had an incredible opportunity to see a taste of the world. Obviously, all in the coast, although we did fly from Mombasa, Kenya to Masai Mara up in the mountains or the higher elevation in Kenya and do an incredible safari. So we did get to go inland a little.
And the kids are how old?
So my son is 13 and my daughter is 10.
Well, what an impression that trip will leave with them for their lives, and you too, of course.
They are just absolute travelers now, and they've made lifelong friends. My daughter is hours on calls every day with her best friend from the voyage.
Oh, great. Hey, listen, this has been a great interview. I've learned a lot about rooftop agrivoltaics. Thank you very much. Our listeners have undoubtedly learned a lot, and maybe we'll circle back in a couple years and find out what's the latest.
That sounds great. It's been an absolute delight to talk about my greatest professional passion. I really appreciate it, Ted. Thanks for asking.
Thank you very much for being on the podcast. Have a great day.
You too.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's Ecologic. We'll see you next time.